We are delighted to have Mr. Blank with us this evening to present his commencement address titled, "Why Your Parents Will Be Happy. 3 of you will make $100 million. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Steve Blank.
Thank you. I'm honored to be with you as we gather to celebrate your graduation. As you know, the school has a distinguished roster of graduates. Earl Bakken, the founder of Medtronic, was an electrical engineering grad. Bob Gore of Gore-Tex and your current president are both alums of your chemical engineering program. In fact, I feel very connected to another one of your grads. I'm sure you all have heard of Seymour Cray. He built a supercomputer company in Chippewa Falls that made the fastest computers in the world. These were very expensive supercomputers. They cost tens of millions of dollars and filled 2 tractor trailers worth of space. Back in Silicon Valley, I co-founded a company that built desktop workstations to compete against Cray. In fact, we bid against them in a sale to the Pittsburgh Supercomputer Center, and we lost. I never forgot that loss because instead of buying hundreds of our small computers, they spent $35 million on that Cray. My startup never recovered, and soon after went out of business. Now, fast forward 15 years, now retired, I noticed that the Pittsburgh Supercomputer Center had put their Cray for sale on eBay. Yep, that $35 million machine was now on sale for $35,000. I bought the Cray. Honest, you could Google Cray on eBay and there I am. I had it shipped to my ranch and kept it in the barn next to the cows and manure. It was closure. Thank you. But the story about Cray is also a story about success and failure. So if I can keep you awake, I'm going to tell you why. Well, many of you thought today was the end of your education. It's really only the beginning. And while you might be moaning about that thought, pay attention, because what I'm about to share could make a few of you very, very successful. For most of you, college was the first day of your own life. The morning you stepped onto campus, you were no longer the child of your parents. College was the first place you could taste the freedom of making your own decisions. And in some of those mornings after, learn the price of indulgence and the value of moderation. Here at school, you had your first years of taking responsibility for yourself. Well, it might not be obvious to you, your college years were a transition from having your parents making decisions for you to making decisions for yourself. But now you face a new chapter that, if you're not careful, could result in having companies making decisions for you. It might just turn out that graduating from college and getting a job may just be an illusion of independence. If you're not careful, you'll simply end up having others tell you what to work on, how to spend your time, when to show up, and when to go home. In fact, working in a company could be an adult version of listening to your parents tell you what you do, only the pay is usually a whole lot better than your allowance. For some of you, that may be exactly what you're looking for. Many of you are going to take what you learned here, get a good job, get married, buy a house, have a family, be a great parent, serve your community and your country, hang with friends, and live a good life. And that's great. Minnesota is a wonderful place to hunt, fish, canoe, raise kids, and pursue lots of interests other than just your job. But all of you will ultimately make a choice about whether you work to live or whether you're going to live to work. That should be a conscious choice. Don't get trapped into the daily routine of showing up and just getting by. While you're excited about your first real job, recognize that your interests and those of your employer are probably not the same. Having your employer tell you what a great job you're doing and rewarding you for it is not the same as discovering your passion and figuring out who you are and what's rewarding for you. What I'm saying is, don't let a career just happen to you. And more importantly, as much as you love, respect, and honor your parents, don't live their lives. Your obligations to meet their expectations ended the day you became an adult. At the end of the day, you could decide whether you want to be an employee with a great attendance record, getting promoted to ever better titles, and working on interesting projects, or whether you want to attempt to do something spectacular. This choice between be or do should be a question you never stop asking yourself for the next 20 years. Be or do? Let me share with you the day I faced the be or do question. Out of the military, my first job in Silicon Valley was one of the most exciting companies you've never heard of. By the time I joined it, it was a decade old and no longer a startup. Our customers were the CIA, the NSA, and the National Reconnaissance Office. Our CEO, Bill Perry, eventually became the Secretary of Defense. In the 1970s and 80s, the U.S. military realized that our advantage over the Soviet Union was in silicon, software, and systems. These technologies allowed our country to build weapons previously thought impossible or impractical. The technology was amazing, and in my 20s, I found myself in the middle of it. Building these systems required resources beyond the scope of any single company. A complete system had spacecraft, it had rockets, and the resources of tens of thousands of people from multiple companies. If you love technologies, these projects are hard to walk away from. It was geek heaven. While I worked on these incredibly interesting intelligence systems, my friends were in startups working on new things called microprocessors. They'd run around saying things like, hey, look, I could program this chip to make the speaker go beep. And I'd roll my eyes comparing these toy-like microprocessors to what I was working on, which was so advanced you would have thought we acquired it from aliens. But before long, I realized that at my company, I was just a cog in a very big wheel. A small team had already figured out how to solve the problem, and tens of thousands of us worked to build the solution. Given where I was in the hierarchy, I calculated the odds of me being in on those decisions didn't look so hot anytime. In contrast, my friends at startups were living in their garages, fueled with energy and passion to use their talents to pursue their own ideas, however unexpected or crazy they sounded. Really, you're building a computer I could have in my house? For me, the light bulb went off when I realized that punching a time clock is not the way to change the world. I chose the path of entrepreneurship and never looked back. You know, engineers used to be the people who made other people's idea work. Today, they changed the world. We live in a time where scientists and engineers are synonymous with continuous innovation. We don't think twice as our phones shrink, our computers fit in our pockets, our cars run on batteries, and our lives are extended as new medical devices are implanted in our bodies. Scientists and engineers no longer work anonymously in back rooms. Today, we celebrate them for improving the quality of people's lives. George Bernard Shaw once said, "Some men see things as they are and ask why, but others dream things that never were and ask why not." Engineers like you have the capacity to move the world forward by continually asking why not. It's your special doing gene that empowers us to do better. You invent, you imagine, you see things that others don't. Where others see blank canvases, you'll see finished paintings. You hear music that's not yet written. You You see bridges that have yet to be built. You envision the products and companies that don't yet exist. University of Minnesota science and engineering alums like you have founded more than 4,000 active companies. They employ more than 500,000 people and generate annual revenues of $90 billion. These alums chose not to take the safe road, but instead to push beyond their boundaries and do. At some time, you might decide you want to become the master of your own destiny, that you want to take an idea and start your own company. All of you sitting here have just earned a degree that gives you choices that very few other professions have. Entrepreneurship is not something foreign. It's built into the DNA of this country. America was built by those who left the old behind. Not too many generations ago, your family packed up what they had, got on a boat, and came to America. They struck out across the country and ended up here in Minnesota. And what's great about the United States is that no other country embraces innovation and entrepreneurship quite like we do. You don't have to stay in one job, and it's really, really, really hard to starve to death. Now, I predict that this season, 78% of all commencement speeches are going to have advice about pursuing your passion and doing stuff you love. But no one actually tells you why. Well, here's the secret. If you're going to spend your career in a company, doing stuff you enjoy will help you keep showing up. But if you want to do something entrepreneurial, just loving what you do isn't enough. You're pursuing ideas you can't get out of your head, ideas that you obsess about, that you work on in your spare time. Because it's that fearless vision and relentless passion are what it takes to sustain an entrepreneur through the inevitable bad times. The times your co-founder quits, or when no one buys, or the product doesn't work. The time when everyone you know thinks that what you're doing is wrong and a waste of time. The time when people tell you that you ought to get a real job. By the way, every year I remind my students that great grades and successful entrepreneurs have at best a zero correlation. And anecdotal evidence suggests the correlation might actually be negative. Now he tells us. There's a big difference between being an employee at a great company and having the guts to start one. You don't get grades for resiliency, curiosity, agility, resourcefulness, pattern recognition, and tenacity, but you do get successful. Now, the downside of starting something new is that it's tough, because unlike the movies, you fail a lot. For every Facebook and Google, thousands never make it. Like rocket science games, which was my biggest failure. 90 days after showing up on the cover of Wired magazine, I knew the game company where I raised $35 million was going out of business. We had believed our own press, inhaled our own fumes, and built lousy games. Customers voted with their wallets and didn't buy our products. The company went out of business, and given the press we had, it was a very public failure. We let our customers, our investors, and our employees down. I thought my career and my life were over. But I learned something important. And in Silicon Valley, honest failure is actually a badge of experience. All of you will fail sometime in your career, or in love, or in life. No one ever sets out to fail. But being afraid to fail means you'll be afraid to try. Playing it safe will get you nowhere. As it turns out, rather than run me out of town, the two venture capitalists that had lost $12 million in my failed startup actually asked me to work with them again. And during the next couple of years, and much humbler, I raised more money and started another company that we were ultimately able to take public. And those patient investors more than made up for their earlier loss, about 1 billion times more. As scientists and engineers, you know about failure. You know that virtually no experiment works the first time. And here's the news. A new company, all you have is a series of untested hypotheses. You learn something vital in school. To test your hypotheses by designing experiments, getting accurate data, analyzing the results, and then modifying those hypotheses based on those results. This is the scientific method, and surprisingly, we've just discovered the exact same method works for startups. Because failure is part of the startup process. And in Silicon Valley, we have a special word for a failed entrepreneur. That word? It's experienced. Our country and entrepreneurial culture is one of second and third chances. It's what makes us great. You don't have to change your name or leave town. Entrepreneurs in America know they get multiple shots at the goal. Now, someday, several of you in this graduating class will be worth $100 million. And a few of you might change the way the world works. I want you to look around. Seriously, look around at each other. Go ahead, take a few seconds. Go take a look around. Yeah? Go ahead. I'll wait. Now, while most of you were looking around, wondering who were the three people going to be worth $100 million, I hope a few of you were feeling sorry for the rest of your classmates, knowing that the most successful person in the audience was going to be you. So these days, I write a blog about entrepreneurship. At the end of each post, I kind of conclude with lessons learned, kind of cliff notes of my key takeaways. So that's how I'm going to finish up today. There are just two lessons that I'd like to pass on to you. Your science or engineering degree gives you tremendous choices, and you and no one else gets to decide two things. One, whether you choose to be or you're going to choose to do, and whether you work to live or whether you're going to live to work. Remember, live your life with no regrets. There's no undo button, and congratulations, you've earned it. Thank you very much.